Episode 1, The Spark That Burns Out. Chapter 1, Truffle, Oil, and Thunder. The food tour moved like an easy river through Florence, a dozen strangers following a guide who waved a folded umbrella like a conductor's baton. Steam rose from Sciacciata as if the bread were breathing. Glasses clinked, the air smelled faintly of tomatoes warmed by the sun. Lydia collected experiences the way she collected recipes, carefully, aware of timing and temperature. She took the offered square of focaccia and noticed the delicate salt, the hint of rosemary that left a piney kiss on her tongue. Life to her Taurus bones was a series of textures to be honored, crisp and soft, cold and warm, patient and wild. Across the marble counter of a tiny alimentari, a man was making conversation with the olive oil vendor in charmed, gesturing Italian. He wasn't just loud, he was bright, the way a window flings open and the room looks new. His laughter had edges, it cut assumptions and let light in. When he turned, his grin landed on her like they were picking up a thread from yesterday. "Marco," he said, offering his name like a handshake and a dare. She gave her own, he repeated it, liking the weight of it. The guide shepherded them along. Marco drifted to her side as if that had been the plan. He was Sagittarius in posture, shoulders angled toward horizon. She was Taurus in gait, grounded even when the cobblestones tried to tilt her ankles. He teased her for reading the labels, she teased him for skipping them. At a gelateria, he stole her spoon with mock outrage, fed her lemon sorbet, and watched for the reaction. Tart, bright, cold against warm, she couldn't stop the smile. He seemed delighted by delight itself. They climbed to a terrace not listed in the brochure, squeezed through a door that looked like it was for brooms, and emerged into copper rooftops and laundry flapping its international Morse code. He pointed at a rooftop where he'd once slept under meteors, then at the dome that looked like a bread loaf someone had glazed. His stories had wind in them: Patagonia, Taipei, a ferry where he'd met a trumpet player who taught him a song he never forgot. She listened with the calm attention of someone who values the story as much as the teller. When he brushed a curl from her cheek, the gesture shifted midair from playful to careful, then hovered as a question. They watched the city exhale into evening. Her senses kept cataloging, the pepper of arugula earlier, the velvet of mozzarella, the stone now cooling under her palms. He looked at her the way people look at roads that keep going. "You decide," he said, acknowledging the moment. She did, but not by speaking. She stepped an inch closer, enough for electricity to find a path, but not enough to be reckless. He respected the inch. That, more than his grin, made her want to keep walking beside him. The tour dispersed into small goodbyes. He lingered. "Stay a few days," he said. "I already am," she deadpanned. "Stay with me inside them," he corrected, and for the first time his volume softened. She didn't answer yet. Taurus didn't rush the dough to rise, but she didn't walk away either. The night smelled like basil and something starting. Chapter 2, The First Kiss Has Teeth. They found a trattoria down a narrow lane where the chef serenaded his basil plant like a beloved aunt. Piscicassio e pepe arrived, glossy, pepper-flecked like night sky. Marco twirled noodles and stories with equal flourish. Lydia grounded both with a fork and the kind of listening that makes even exaggerations feel seen. "Stay with me in these days," he tried again, less a plea than a possibility placed on the table between the water glass and the bread basket. On the walk back, the Arno wore its evening colors, slate with coins of light. The wind had ideas about her curls, tossing them toward her face, and he stepped in to tie his sun-faded bandana around her wrist. It felt like a flag and a ribbon and a private joke. She caught it, he noticed her catching it. That shared awareness was a match head. The strike was inevitable. The kiss wasn't tidy. It had laughter at the start, the quick intake of breath when surprise collides with certainty, the pepper sting still on their lips. He tasted like lemon and warm bread. She tasted like the wine they'd split and something he would later call home. He pressed her gently back to the cool stone. She tested the pressure, not resisting so much as calibrating. Her hands found the line of his jaw, the soft roughness where he'd missed a patch shaving. His hands hovered first, asking, not assuming, then found her waist with the kind of care that suggested he knew the difference between thrill and respect. When they paused, foreheads touching, the city's hum returned as if someone slid the volume up. "You make me present," he said, startled by his own honesty. "You make me brave," she said, surprised to hear the thought out loud. They smiled at their ridiculousness and didn't apologize for it. In her room later, she sat on the edge of the bed and turned the bandana over in her hands. The seam was frayed, a line of small rebellions against order. It felt like an emblem of him, but also like a test for her. Could she wear something that refused to be neat? She was capable of impulsive yesies, she just insisted on owning them. She texted him a single peach emoji and then, to avoid narrative overreach, added, "breakfast." He sent a compass, "point me." She slept with the window cracked, the city breathing with her. In the morning, the light made everything look like a decision she could live with. Chapter 3, Rooms with Windows Open. They met the day with market peaches that bled summer down their wrists, laughing at the need to lick sweetness before it escaped. A rented scooter waited like a dare. Marco handed her the helmet with a flourish, and she buckled it with the seriousness of someone who respects roads and luck. The countryside opened, cypress sentinels, vineyards marching in green rows, a sky so blue it felt freshly painted. He took curves like a conversation. She held on with a grip that trusted the driver and herself. At a vineyard, he charmed the pourer into an off-menu tasting. She charmed the sommelier into revealing a cool stone cellar. Their banter slid into confession in the dark, his fear of routine masquerading as a love of freedom, her devotion to ritual that sometimes hardened into stubbornness. He described a map of cities pinned to a wall. She described a recipe box fat with notes in her grandmother's looping hand. When their fingers threaded together, it was less a spark than a settling, like weight on a scale finding true. That evening, a room with a high window and a white coverlet became a small country with only 2 citizens. They undressed each other with the deliberate curiosity of people who respect mystery and pleasure in equal measure. He was impatient in the way of someone who has often made speed a virtue. She set the metronome. Kisses unfolded rather than collided. When he learned the step she liked, the angle that made her breath change, he repeated it with the bright joy of a traveler learning a useful phrase. She guided, not with diagrams, but with touches and a tone of voice that brooked no apology for desire. He listened, the most attractive thing he did all night. They took breaks like good cooks, tasting, adjusting, letting heat build without rushing it into scorch. The window let in the night's cool hand, the sheet tangled then smoothed. Laughter threaded through the quiet in the way of new lovers who have not yet built rituals but are already building trust. After they shared a bottle of something mineral and clean, the cork rolling like a sleepy animal toward the baseboard. She traced the hollow of his collarbone. He narrated constellations they couldn't see. He asked about her favorite dinner to cook for someone she loved. She said, "One I know they'll want seconds of," and he grinned with a flash of mischief and gratitude. He mentioned a festival 2 towns over, friends he might meet, the word might shape like a habit. She pictured a train, a sweater tucked into her bag, snacks that kept spirits even. "We can go," she said. "Or I could go," he said, and winced as if habit had spoken without permission. She turned his face to hers with steady fingers. "Be here," she said. He nodded, chastened and sincere for the span of a breath. They slept with the window open. Somewhere a bell marked the hour. She felt the hour mark her. Chapter 4. The Chase Wears Running Shoes. Dawn found them squeaking past rows of parked Vespas and out toward the coast, the wind turning their eyes bright. Breakfast was anchovies on toast and oranges split by hand, salt and sweet in conversation. Marco taught a gaggle of kids to juggle. Lydia bought a linen dress and a straw bag and felt their honest weight settle on her shoulders like approval. They walked until their feet argued. They sat until their legs forgave. They kissed in laughing fits and sudden hushes. Every hour he proposed a detour that glittered with possibility, an unmarked path to a lighthouse, a rumored beach accessible only by faith and bad steps, a boat he swore a cousin of a friend would loan them for a while. She followed most of them, not out of fear of missing but out of curiosity in him. How joy brightened his whole face, how novelty seemed to drink him like water. By afternoon, a pattern revealed itself like low tide, thrill that would not land. She enjoyed thrill. She also enjoyed arrival. Desire surprised them under the shade of trees overlooking rocks where waves lunged and retreated. They kissed until the world narrowed to breath and a thrum that felt both ancient and startlingly specific. Later, in privacy, they found the patient heat again, her voice an instrument, his attention the new skill he was proud of learning. They moved like a coastline, in and out, building and easing, neither of them interested in a race when a journey was available. The afterglow was a generous bowl. She could have lived there all evening, skin humming, mind quiet, the future as near as the next kiss. But futures have habits. As she planned dinner, octopus charred just so, fennel sliced thin, a rustic white that tasted like stones in sunlight, he scrolled messages. "Friends from Lisbon," he said, eyes brightening the way they had when the lighthouse appeared around a bend. They're nearby doing a hiking loop, might join for a night. She pictured bunks, shoes piled, laughter she wasn't inside of, a version of him that belonged to everyone and therefore to no one. "We have plans," she said, calm but not vague. His smile flickered, then reasserted itself larger. "We can have new ones," he said, as if novelty bore moral superiority. She was not against new, she was against erasing old without ceremony. They ate anyway, he praised everything enthusiastically. She accepted the praise without letting it erase the question mark hovering between them. When he suggested sleeping under stars on the beach, she said yes because the sea was talking like a friend, and because saying yes shouldn't always feel like surrender. They lay under a sky that kept its secrets. He traced a pretend constellation and named it Arya the Archer, because you shoot yourself toward what you want, she snorted. "Not Sagittarius then, don't panic," he said, and she heard the affection. She tucked that into the pocket where she kept both joy and warnings. The tide kept kissing the shore, arriving and arriving. Chapter 5: Vanishing Act. It happened without warning, as most vanishing acts do. Lydia had woken early to buy tomatoes, basil, and fresh ricotta from the morning market in Pisa. The air was warm already, carrying the mixed perfume of ripe fruit, espresso, and the faint iron tang of bicycle chains. She loved the rhythm of local commerce, the vendor pressing fruit into her palm, the weighing of produce on old brass scales, the murmured calculations that always ended with something generous. She knew every stall by scent, every face by gesture. A nod meant, "How's your mother?" A wink meant, "These are the good ones, don't tell the others." Her basket filled in gentle increments, plum tomatoes still dusted with soil, basil that perfumed her wrist, ricotta so fresh it trembled in its paper wrapping. She pictured the meal she would make that night: pasta ribbons slicked with olive oil, roasted cherry tomatoes blistering in their skins, a crumble of salty cheese melting into the folds. It was her love language, food laid carefully before someone she wanted to keep close. Her phone buzzed. Marco. She smiled, expecting something playful, a picture of his morning espresso, a teasing remark about her being the kind of woman who treated grocery shopping like a religious practice. Instead, she read, "Don't wait up, last-minute trip, back soon, promise." No details, no location pin, just a sentence that folded the air in half. She stood in the middle of the market, surrounded by noise that no longer reached her. A child laughed, a vendor shouted "tree per sink," but everything muffled as though she'd stepped underwater. She typed "Where are you going?" then deleted it, typed "When will you be back?" deleted that too. Each draft felt like begging for crumbs. The Taurus in her wanted solidity, a plan, presence, not a shadow play of excuses. She carried her basket home and set the ingredients on the counter one by one. The tomatoes glistened in the light, the basil drooped, the ricotta puddled slightly, softening as she hesitated to refrigerate it. Cooking alone suddenly felt theatrical, performing affection with no audience. That evening she ate at a small trattoria, too proud to let her table go unused. The chair across from her was loud with absence. She chose roasted sea bass with fennel, drank white wine that bit her tongue but tasted little of either. Around her, other tables hummed with easy laughter, couples trading bites, elbows touching, stories spilling out over shared plates. She envied the ordinariness of companionship, the comfort of someone who showed up on purpose. After dinner, she walked through the city's squares, her sandals clicking on stones older than heartbreak. The night smelled of rain that wouldn't come. Tourists posed under the soft halo of street lamps, unaware that the woman passing them was taking inventory of her own silence. A church door stood open. Inside, frescoes glowed faintly in candlelight. Lydia stepped in, not to pray but to pause. She lit a candle and watched the wax pool, her reflection trembling in the glass. She didn't ask God for answers. She asked herself why she kept mistaking volatility for passion and freedom for interest. Why she had accepted a man who treated presence like a favor instead of a choice. When she left, the night had cooled. The Arno shimmered, carrying the city's lights like a secret it couldn't keep. At midnight, her phone pinged again. A photo, Marco on a mountain, arms wide, strangers grinning at his side. His caption, "Found a trail, you'd have loved it." Would she? Maybe, but she would have loved being asked. The difference mattered. Back in her room, she folded his bandana carefully and placed it on the nightstand. She ran her finger along the frayed seam, remembering his laughter when he'd tied it around her wrist that day in Florence. "Keeps luck close," he'd said, as if luck could replace loyalty. Frayed wasn't the same as free. She pressed it flat under her palm, as if the cloth could steady the storm his absence had left behind. The night felt endless, the ceiling indifferent. Sleep came late, restless, tugged by dreams of roads she hadn't agreed to walk, trails she'd never been invited on, mountains that belonged to someone else's story. When dawn seeped in through the shutters, her eyes were open. The basil had wilted, the ricotta had spoiled, and she realized that sometimes the worst part of being left isn't the silence, it's the echo of someone who never learned how to stay. Chapter 6: The Confrontation, Plain and Hot. He returned 2 days later, sunburned, smelling of pine resin and sweat. The door swung open with the same recklessness he carried everywhere, the kind that turned every entrance into an announcement. He kissed her cheek as if no gap had existed, as if the calendar had not added pages without her permission. "You won't believe the hike," he said, dropping his bag on the bed, his grin as wide as the mountain horizon. His skin glowed with that careless beauty that comes from sleep deprivation and euphoria. He began to talk before she could respond, about the sunrise that looked like spilled paint, the group he'd met from Lisbon, the music they'd played on tin speakers at the summit, the way the air had made him feel infinite. Lydia listened, but she didn't nod. Her silence was full-bodied, not sharp but weighted, the kind that turns air thick. When his story trailed off into gestures, she finally said evenly, "You left mid-vacation, without telling me, without asking." He blinked, thrown off by the calm. For a moment he seemed to search her face for the usual softness, the easy forgiveness he had always counted on. When he didn't find it, he reached for his oldest defense, charm. "Lydia," he said, grin returning like a reflex. It was spontaneous. You'd have hated it, no plan, no map, no guarantee of a bed. It wasn't about leaving you, it was about leaving, she finished for him. He hesitated, then shrugged, the gesture boyish. About living, about not missing a moment. "You missed this one," she said quietly. Her voice wasn't raised, but it cut through his story like scissors through fabric. The truth of it left no room for performance. His grin flickered, his energy stumbled. "You're heavy," he blurted, reaching for cruelty the way children reach for a stone to throw. "You make things too serious." The word cracked the air. She felt it land in her chest, solid and cold. "Serious," she repeated, tasting it. "Serious is how I love. Steady is how I keep space for fire without burning to ash." He started pacing, his restlessness filling the small room. He tugged at the bandana he'd left on her nightstand, the same one he'd tied around her wrist like a promise. "I can't be contained," he argued, voice rising, gesturing toward the window as if freedom were waiting right outside. "I'm not a container," she said, voice low but certain. "I'm a person, a partner, one who deserves to be chosen before you run off chasing the next horizon." The words found him, he stopped mid-step. For a heartbeat, he looked 12 years old, a boy ashamed of breaking something delicate and not knowing how to fix it. His shoulders sagged. "I don't know how," he admitted, and it was the truest thing he'd said all evening. "I know," she said, not cruel, not forgiving, just factual. He reached for her then, palms warm against her arms, his touch the apology he didn't know how to voice. She didn't step back, but she didn't melt either. Her stillness was its own refusal, a new kind of strength he hadn't met before. He wanted her to erase his mistake with a kiss, to rewrite the last 2 days into a single forgettable blur. But she knew erasure wasn't love, accountability was. The silence that followed was the kind that stretches but doesn't snap. Outside, someone's radio played an old Italian love song, its melody half mournful, half sweet. The scent of his pine resin clashed with the faint perfume of basil wilting on the table. Everything felt like proof that two beautiful things could exist together and still not belong. He finally sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on knees, head bowed. "I never meant to hurt you," he said. "I know," she answered again. Her voice had softened, but not for him, for herself. Forgiveness, she realized, wasn't always about staying. When he looked up, the grin was gone. What remained was a man who had mistaken movement for growth, adventure for intimacy. She had loved that about him once, the wildness, the hunger, but now it looked like a cage that traveled. She walked to the window and opened it. The city breathed in, cool and salt-edged. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The distance between them wasn't filled by silence, it was the silence. Two people who had been a constellation for a short season, now realizing the stars didn't align after all. She turned back to him, her face calm. "Next time," she said, "warn the person you leave behind." He nodded, wordless. When the door closed behind him that night, she felt neither relief nor rage, just the quiet ache of truth settling into its proper place. Some endings don't explode, she thought, some just stop shining. Chapter 7, The Last Night Isn't a Cliffhanger. They walked one final evening together, the Tuscan sky bleeding gold into rose. He tried to fix what was already split, painting futures with vague brushstrokes. "Maybe we could meet in Barcelona. I might come to Rome after the trail. We'll see." Each word wavered like smoke. She listened without interrupting, Taurus patience serving her well. But she felt the truth like a stone in her pocket. A maybe couldn't house her heart. She needed more than sparks, she needed roots. Back at her room, they chose tenderness over anger. They undressed slowly, honoring what had been real. Their intimacy was softer this time, less firework than ember, hands lingering, kisses memorizing. He moved as though trying to apologize with skin. She allowed the closeness but didn't confuse it with healing. Desire pulsed gently, not urgently, and when release came it was like exhaling after holding a breath too long. She pressed her face to his shoulder, inhaled sun and soap and salt. "Thank you," she whispered. "I wanted to be the man you deserve," he said into the darkness. "I wanted you to be the man you are, just staying," she replied. They slept back to back, a kindness in distance. In the morning, she left his bandana folded neatly on the dresser. He left a note with a doodle of a compass. "You helped me find a north." It was sweet, it was not enough. Chapter 8 Grounded is Not Boring. The train to Rome carried her away through vineyards and fields, the glass reflecting her own thoughtful face. She messaged a friend the short version, met a man, learned a lesson, ate magnificently. The longer version lived in her chest, steady as her own pulse. Excitement without grounding was a kite in a storm, thrilling until the string snapped. She wanted wind, yes, but also the hand that held the string with care. She booked a cooking class for that evening, already imagining flour dusting her fingers, the laughter of strangers kneading dough beside her. Tomorrow would be a museum, the day after, dinner at a trattoria known for cassio e pepe so glossy it mirrored your own reflection. She would travel the way she loved, savor first, decide carefully, let surprise in only if it came with respect. Her phone pinged, a new number, a rooftop concert invitation. She said yes, not because she feared missing out, but because the offer fit the rhythm of her own choosing. In a quiet piazza, she sipped espresso that bit first, then bloomed. She opened her journal and wrote, "I want passion that arrives and stays, a partner who texts before the mountain, laughter that doesn't run." The words looked back, steady and uncompromising. She smiled, proud of the woman who could enjoy wild sparks but also walk away when they failed to kindle. Love wasn't a chase, love was a table set, a chair pulled out, a hand that stayed in yours when the view grew beautiful. She raised her cup to that truth and drank it slow. Like this video, subscribe, more stories like this are coming.